Brooke Pryor, she covers the Pittsburgh Steelers for ESPN. She just got off a Cam Sutton news presser beat, whatever it is you've been delayed. What's going on, pal?
It's a news palooza is what
News
I prefer to
palooza?
call it. I found out this morning that Cam Sutton was in the building for the in
Sure.
Pittsburgh, just about a mile from me, and he is expected to sign a 1-year vet minimum deal. He's been a free agent since the Lions released him in March following the issuance of an arrest warrant for at that time, what was a felony domestic battery. It's since been reduced to a misdemeanor, but yeah, Cam Sutton, an old friend for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is back. Somewhat improbably, but also not improbably. I think this is about what I expected to end up happening.
A couple teams in the league are comfortable taking on a risk like this. Steelers are absolutely one of them. One of the other teams used to cover the Chiefs, absolutely one of them. The pros and cons of that approach we'll leave for another day. But yes, Cam Sutton will be a Pittsburgh Steeler this year. Let's focus big picture on the team and the Steelers and where this franchise is, because I was at camp less than a year ago, and Kenny Pickett still had massive autograph lines. And there were people saying Kenny Pickett's the guy, and that, oh, you don't understand. He plays better in 2 minutes. He's got moxie. He makes things happen, all that stuff. That was quickly abandoned. They gave up on that I don't know what, I assume there was some game last year where they said, okay, we need to start preparing for something else. They bring in 2 quarterbacks. We're going to start here. What do you expect the quarterback scenarios in 2024 to look like? Like, is Justin Fields, is he in actual competition? Is he going to play this year? Like, my feeling when I go on TV and they say, what's going on? I think Justin Fields has a chance to play later in the season, but I think that Russell Wilson's going to get first team reps and have a stranglehold on that job. You're there all the time. You're talking to people all the time. Like, take me through what this is going to look like before we get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is Russell Wilson's team and Russell Wilson's job to lose. And I don't think it's a job that he will be put in a position to lose until we get into the actual season. I think that Mike Tomlin's been very specific in using this pole position phrase, which has been used far too much, but there also isn't necessarily a better way to phrase it. And I was talking with someone and they pointed out that often the guy that wins pole position in a race doesn't necessarily end up winning the race or finishing first. And so I think that is exactly why he's using this. Like, they have positioned Russell Wilson to be in a place to be the leader of this offense, especially because one of the things that was the undoing of this offense was the fact that they didn't have a strong leadership structure. There wasn't a really veteran guy. I think the oldest guy on the offense was Isaac Seumalo, who A, was relatively new to the organization, and B, is not like a loud type of rallying leadership guy. Like, they needed a guy that is the unquestioned leader. And so that's why they bring in Russell Wilson. That's kind of what he sold them on when he was in Pittsburgh. And then when they traded for Justin Fields, A, they're telling you that by giving up a 6th round pick, that's it. A, there was no real market for Justin Fields trade market wise. And B, they do not see him as a day one starter right now. They felt comfortable giving up that draft capital because they think that he is a good number 2 right now, and maybe he will eventually come back to being a number 1 and being a franchise quarterback. I think they looked at saying, hey, we've got an older guy in Russell Wilson who is very inexpensive. We can pair him with a younger guy who is inexpensive right now, and then kind of let the season play out and make our decision at the end of the year. So yes, I think this is Russell Wilson's job and team, but this team does need to see Justin Fields on the field in the regular season because they have to make a decision on him too. What kind of contract is he going to get? Because both guys are only on 1-year deals. So it's kind of like they said, you know what, this is a future Omar Khan problem. In the immediate, we've got that solved, but we're going to let this be a problem for future Mike Tomlin and future Omar Khan, but it's not in the distant future. It's very near future. So it's going to be something that we're not going to have a resolution on in week 1. This is not going to say Russell Wilson wins the job. Russell Wilson is the starter at the end. It's going to be more Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett. And I just hope that the Steelers learn their lesson after how poorly that competition and management went when Kenny Pickett was unceremoniously thrown in to be the starter at halftime of week 4 and got no reps with the ones. And it was very disjointed. So hopefully they have learned from that and will manage this dance a little bit more smoothly.
One thing on Fields, and maybe it's Wilson too. I just want to ask about Arthur Smith here, but one thing that's interesting is I don't know if either guy is necessarily a scheme fit for what Arthur Smith likes to do. And I think that Justin Fields was out of the top 32 as far as intermediate throws last year. As far as obviously everyone talked about he wouldn't use the middle of the field with the Bears. We don't know if that was play calling, whether that was Fields or not. Arthur Smith's going to throw intermediate passes over the middle of the field. That's what he's going to do over and over and over again. Is there an expectation that either of these guys will conform to what Arthur Smith wants to do, or Arthur Smith meet them where they are?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both,
Mhm.
which I'm so sorry that is such a coach speak answer. It's not clear.
We're going to be
either way.
multiple. We're going to be multiple.
It's going to be all of the above.
Right.
Because it's also interesting. I was reading this morning, Russell Wilson's offense, I believe, had the fewest number of, I don't know if it was targets or yards or completions to tight ends last year, and the Steelers were like second to last. So you pair that with an offensive coordinator that loves using tight ends,
Sure.
and that adds another interesting wrinkle to it. I think that he, Arthur Smith is going to have to play to some of the strengths of these guys,
Mhm.
but these guys are also going to have to do some of what he wants to do. I do think that both of them are better with play action. We know that Arthur Smith loves play action. Get excited for a lot of play action. All of that being said, though, I think that a big component of Arthur Smith's offense and scheme that's going to work with the guys that they have is that a lot of it is minimizing the quarterback or minimizing the quarterback needing to be Superman, minimizing the need for him to go in there and cook and be the chef in
Mhm.
the kitchen. Like, this is all about the offensive line, the running backs, using the tight ends, but mostly the O line and the running backs. Like, talking with those guys, the O linemen were telling me last week, like, we are excited. This is our kind of offense. This is a dream. We have more fun in a run scheme and a run protecting scheme than pass pro like that. They're like, we don't enjoy doing that. We'll do it obviously, but like, we want to get down and dirty in the trenches and bulldoze the way for Najee Harris and Jalen Warren to eat. And that is what a lot of this offense is going to be predicated on. And I think that that is why Arthur Smith ultimately got the job, and we didn't see it go to someone like a Clint Kubiak or someone
Mm.
that was going to have an air raid or just an
Sure.
all out like vertical attack. Is the Steelers at their core are a team that they want to be down and dirty. They want to push the ball in your face and they want to win by time of possession. And they just weren't able to do that in the Matt Canada offense. And so this is kind of how they're going to correct and get back to it. And they're hoping that, hey, as long as we have a serviceable quarterback, as long as we have a quarterback that minimizes mistakes, we'll be fine. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields have not always done that, which is why this is kind of an arranged marriage where maybe they didn't fully take like the compatibility quiz beforehand. And it was just like, well, you'll be fine. You can figure it out. So good thing they have training camp to figure it out, because I think it is going to take some adapting.
How good is this roster? Like I'm looking at it and it looks pretty damn good. And I was going to ask you like who the second best player on the team was, but there's a bunch of candidates, and that's always my favorite thing to do with training camp. Remember the Ravens were pretty mediocre a couple of years ago, and I remember being at training camp, and it was in the Flacco era, and I was just like, "Hey, who's the best player on this team?" I just asked the beats, and they were like, oh, "I don't know, they got some nose tackle," and I was like, "Oh, this is a bad team. This is like a not a good team." And if there's not a ton of guys who come to mind where you say, okay, this guy's elite, this guy would start for 32 teams, this guy would start for 29 teams, I just think you can tell pretty quickly. This roster is kind of stacked. And even, I mean, like, even the question marks, like everybody says Zach Frazier is going to be a dog day one, a starter day one. He was Bruce Feldman on this show's biggest steal. I think Nate Tice shouted him out a couple days ago. I think Roman Wilson. I think they crushed the draft. I really think they crushed the draft. I think their young guys are progressing really well. That's always a Steelers trait. Remember, before both of our time, rookies didn't play in Pittsburgh, and now they do, but they just get developed pretty quickly and they get up there. This is a big question because this division is unbelievably stacked, and at least two of the quarterbacks are significantly better than what the Steelers are going to have. The defense in Cleveland is probably on balance, just going to give them a little bit of an edge. But I don't think like I think any four of these teams can win the division. But it seems to me like this roster, if they get average quarterback play from Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, if they tend to go that route in the second half of the season, this team could be really good.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why they even made the playoffs last year, right?
Mhm.
Like, they just got serviceable, solid, steady quarterback play from Mason Rudolph, and they made the playoffs. They absolutely had no business being in there, but that's how good the rest of this roster is. And honestly, it's been that way for several years when you look at just the raw pieces that they have, but it's about making those pieces fit together, which is obviously like that's how football works. It's a team sport. But when you can say TJ Watt's your best player, your second best player, Minka Fitzpatrick, or is it
Probably, yep.
George Pickens,
Yep.
or is it Najee Harris,
Right.
or is it Alex Highsmith, or is it Cam Hayward? Like there are so many options, and I think that they have a lot of foundational pieces. I do worry about depth because that's something that, like, especially in the wide receiver group, George Pickens is your number one, and there I think is a big fall off to number two, who at this point I guess is Van Jefferson,
Van Jefferson,
maybe will
yeah.
be Roman Wilson, could be Calvin Austin. I
Mhm.
don't feel great about that collection of eligibles, as Mike Tomlin would say, but also, do you need a wide receiver too if you've got Pat Fryermuth at tight end? I mean, he was so underutilized last year and he was dealing with a hamstring injury, but he's got the body type and I think the skills to be a Travis Kelce like. He is not Travis Kelce. We're not going to go like completely insane, but like he's got the pass catching ability to I think really be a versatile weapon in this offense. Like they the weak spots aren't even that weak. Like I would say CB2 isn't the strongest, wide receiver 2 not the strongest. Inside linebacker, we haven't even mentioned Patrick Queen. Like
Mhm. I was about to mention that, yeah.
in what universe do we forget that Patrick Queen is one of these offseason acquisitions because they got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? Like, I think that Patrick Queen was the most important signing for this team in the offseason, especially when you look at Cole Holcomb's injury. Quan Alexander was only on a 1-year deal. Landon Roberts is a dog, but he is an older dog, and like he can still kill you with his stare, but like he's lost a step or two. Still incredibly talented guy, but like I just think that this team, you put it in a couple other divisions, and it's I think that they're in the
Yes.
conversation to win some other divisions. Maybe I hate to say like the AFC South, like I hate to target other divisions because now the AFC South has
Please,
obviously
please
the
target the
Texans.
AFC South. You can do that. That's fine.
I,
The
you
Texans
know,
are pretty good. The
they're
Texans
pretty
are pretty
good,
good.
but
And the
like
Colts are pretty good.
right. But I feel like the AFC North is the one division where you could easily say any one of these teams could win and any one of these teams could lose, which is why it makes it exciting to cover. But it is, I think, this is why the Steelers are going to be in a battle every single year. And why I think it kind of hurts them that they don't start divisional play until like November 17th or November
What is
20th.
that? And then the schedule makers were like, it's like a college basketball season. What? No, it's not,
No,
because it's a different sport.
they are so much more beat up because I think one thing that's helped the Steelers in the last couple of years is they've had an early division game that they've stolen that they
Yeah.
probably shouldn't win. Like they beat the Bengals in,
Hmm.
I think it was week 1 a couple of years ago, and TJ
Yeah,
Watt
I
got hurt
remember
after
that.
that. And they had a little bit of a dip, but like, hey, you've already got that division win because you caught the Bengals before they figured out that they have to have an offensive line to protect Joe Burrow. And now,
When literally Joe Burrow turned into it was like the end of rookie of the year. He forgot how to play the
yes,
sport for like 3 weeks, and they caught him then.
exactly. And so I think, yes, it helps the Steelers because they are a team that can get really hot in December. Mike Tomlin has that thing where he said unleash hell in December, but like it was a very double-sided sword there where yes, sometimes they unleash hell and sometimes they just unleash stinkers and you don't really know what you're going to get until you're in the heat of it. So if they can unleash hell the way they did at the end of this last season, great, you're in good shape. Good thing you're catching all these guys at the end. But if you're falling apart at that point, if injuries are mounting, if 35-year-old Cam Hayward is falling apart and TJ Watt is being double teamed and whatever else, like
Hmm.
good luck, but it's Mike Tomlin and every time I say I don't know how they're going to make the playoffs this year, like I'm booking a flight for week 1 of the playoffs for the wild card round of the playoffs. So what do I know?
Can I ask you a stupid question?
Always.
I mean, they're all stupid, but can you explain? Just you're around it, you hear people describe it, you see it, you're in the locker room. Can you explain why Mike Tomlin is able to get teams across the finish line the way he does, because there have been 4 or 5 seasons, and I saw someone had a tweet earlier today. I apologize, I can't cite them, about the point differential of every season. And there have been years where they've won 12 games or 11 games or 10 games, and they've had a plus 100 point differential or plus 120. And there have been years they've done it with a negative 50, years they've done it with a negative 30. But they're able to win games, which, for you kids at home, winning used to be something that mattered before we started just valuing process and best practices. But they're able to win. They're able to win games. Can you explain what the feeling is when it's like, okay, we're going to just get this team across the finish line. We're going to get to 9 wins, 10 wins, whatever. How that just unfolds in front of your eyes when you're watching practice every day?
I think the thing you said at the beginning there, I'm in the locker room, which gives me this unique look at how Mike Tomlin operates, not only on the field, but post practice and sometimes before practice. I've been in other NFL locker rooms, right? I have never seen a coach come in and hang out in the locker room the way that Mike
Yeah.
Tomlin does. Like, there is truly something to be said for he is a player's coach. And that doesn't mean that he coddles them. He's not sugarcoating things. He's figured out the perfect combination of being transparent, being brutally honest, but also being there when you need him. That's one of my favorite things to just watch in the locker room. He was standing with Russell Wilson after practice at his locker for a good 5 minutes, just shooting the breeze. I remember a couple of years ago, he was talking with some of the linemen about a bar that he likes to go to after he goes and skis. Like, he is just a relatable guy in a way that really endears his players to him. And I was talking with Justin Fields about that just last week, about what surprises you about Mike Tomlin. And he's like, the surprising thing is that he is exactly what you expect and hope him to be, but you don't really know until you're in it, and you just see how down to earth he is. He's figured out a way to make his players want to play for him. And I think that the best example of that and how deeply he feels and cares, like it's not just a job for him, is when he was talking at the end of last season about how much he wants to win a Super Bowl for some of the other guys. And he got choked up talking about how much it hurts him that Marquise Pouncey never won a Super Bowl. Like, he feels that way about guys like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, but I think he could just as easily feel that way about a guy that's only been in that roster, in that room for a year or two. Like, he connects with you, he cares about you, and that's why he got an A on that NFLPA survey for how players feel about their coaches. And I think there's the biggest gap in how Mike Tomlin is regarded internally versus the external perception, at least locally, or maybe it's the fan base perception of a coach and how players feel about a coach, because the fan base in Pittsburgh says winning 10 games isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Just getting to the playoffs isn't good enough. You need to go farther. But there's also the reality that they wouldn't even get that far if not for Mike Tomlin, the football coach, in terms of leading men. Now, there is a conversation to be had about, well, Mike Tomlin is in a unique position because while he's the coach and there is a GM and an owner, he has a big say in how this roster is constructed. So he is responsible for some of these guys that they're bringing in and some of the guys that maybe have a talent deficiency that are not getting them to that next level. But he really coaches up the guys that he does have that gets them to at least making the playoffs. So I mean, he is one of the all-time greats for a reason, and I love watching how he interacts with guys, because he really does care. He's not going to go home and turn off his phone and not talk to you. Like, he is available, and he's earned all of their respects.
I for sure completely agree. I think the fan base criticism, and I've seen it on Twitter and heard it and stuff. The hardest thing to do in sports is to win consistently without a quarterback, and I would argue it's been kind of a while. Now, listen, there have been flops. The last game that Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and Ben Roethlisberger played together was, I believe, lost to Blake Bortles. Like, that's a flop. But everybody has flops. Like, it happens. And Mike Tomlin has won a Super Bowl, obviously. But, winning consistently without a quarterback is next to impossible, and he does it. And by the way, if they win this year with Russell Wilson, that's winning without a quarterback, because Sean Payton couldn't really do it. Sean Payton lost by 85,000 points to the Dolphins. Okay. So it's to manufacture something out of nothing is football miracle. And he's able to do it all the time. I agree. Like, the honesty part of it, I think, and I've heard people say this who've played on the Steelers before, where it's like, especially with the veterans, he's brutally honest with them and says like, "Hey," like almost like he's able to put himself, even though he only played I think college football at William and Mary, he's able to put himself in an NFL veteran's mind because he's been around it for so long. And part of that is like I've heard he'll say to guys, 5 or 6 year guys, "Hey, I'm I'm going to talk to the young guys today, and like you've heard this before, feel free to just tune out." And I'm not sure he says it that directly, but like
Right.
he'll say that, where it's just like, "Hey, just know that I'm targeting these the second year guys didn't work out as hard as they should have had. I'm going to get on their ass today. You do whatever you need to do." And like I think there's a I think there are guys who are in their middle of the career who find that refreshing. And I think the pivot pod with him and Ryan Clark and Channing Crowder is one of the best things I've ever heard, because it's like he runs towards coaching. He wants to do it. But I think the flip side of that is knowing when to not coach. And a lot of that comes through your interactions with your veterans, with your guys who are established in the league. And I think that it's a cliche. You mentioned, you mentioned the coaching cliche you used earlier. I'll use one as well. He pushes all the right buttons. And I think that it's extremely hard to find that balance in football.
Yeah, I mean, I think look no further than how he handled the George Pickens situation last year. I honestly, I disagreed with the way that he handled it, because he came out and he chastised George for how he dealt with the media, at least to the media. He said, George needs to get better at how he interacts with you guys, but we're addressing it with him. Like, he was addressing that part of the problem versus the bigger issue is probably like not blocking and some other things that he was
Yeah.
doing behind the scenes, not being fully professional. But like, there was no serious punishment for Pickens, which I thought was a terrible decision. And it may come back to bite him this year or in the future because you didn't harshly punish him at the time to prove a point. But he knew that it, depending on how he handled it, could elicit one of two responses. Like either Pickens is going to shut down or he's going to go off. And he pushed the right buttons that Pickens then had such an incredible end to the season when they really needed it. And if he comes down hard on him and suspends him for a game or sits him for a half, you might not get that production out of him. Now, maybe you've created, like I said, a monster who now thinks that he can do whatever he wants and, he rules the roost and there are no consequences. But at the time, he got exactly what he needed out of him for that team. And he was also betting on himself, saying, all right, I'm going to do this. It could create this down the road, but I believe that I can manage it when it comes to it. And I just think he is so perceptive at knowing exactly what these guys need, when they need it. And it's something that you can't know unless you are in that locker room as a player. And I only get a glimpse of because I'm able to just kind of be in there and sit back and observe and be a fly on the wall. He's someone that I would love to play for if I was any kind of athletically talented beyond about high school AAU when I rode the bench. I think he might make me cry now, but I mean, I would love to be in the huddle with him just all the time, just watching what he does. He should be the focus of a psychology lesson.
Brooke Pryor, tell us where we can find you. Pitch something. What do you got going on?
I have a story that just ran recently on the biggest beneficiary of Cam Hayward not being around, even though he did report earlier this week. Keanu Benton is someone that I would keep an eye on. Also may have something later this summer about the man who is trying to reinvigorate Russell Wilson.
Is it Russell Wilson? Is the answer, is Russell Wilson trying to reinvigorate Russell Wilson?
Yes, but like
so.
an external human,
Okay, good.
beyond Russell Wilson. That would be a very meta answer, and that could be a potential story down the road. But there is
Mr.
an actual
Unlimited?
physical human. Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Unlimited.
I love that. Brooke Pryor, thank you so much, pal.
See ya.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. All right, Ben Baby is here. He is the Bengals reporter for ESPN. He's one of my favorites. He's a big high school and college football fan, just like me, but it's Texas instead of Florida in his area of expertise, and he can probably not even watch an Ohio football game. Like he probably just is sitting around watching Archbishop Moeller. Is that that's a big high school in Cincinnati, right? Is that right?
Yeah, Moeller's
What's the
big.
one that all the Notre Dame kids come from?
Yeah.
It's Moeller,
Yes,
right?
correct. Yeah, Moeller. Yeah, I believe it's the GCL South is the exact conference that Cincinnati is very proud of. So I still I hate to admit this, but I have not been to a Cincinnati high school football game yet, which is I feel like
Mhm.
a thing that I
Fraudulent.
need to get
Fraudulent.
done at some point. So because they do say it's very good, I tell them I understand what you're saying, but it is a little bit better back in the great state of Texas. We had a great Florida discussion in the locker room because we got a lot of St. Thomas Aquinas folks. Jordan Ballard and I had a
Sure.
good St. Thomas Aquinas conversation. So it's good. I also enjoy the fact that we both cheer for teams that lost in our respective conference finals, and you still rep your Rangers, which are good. My Stars got housed by the Oilers. It was not fun to watch, but that's how it goes sometimes.
I wear a Rangers hat around in lieu of actually going to a game, which would bankrupt me. I was the other day. I was looking at the Utah hockey team season ticket prices, and like one game to a playoff game is more than a whatever they're going to call it, a Utah Yeti season ticket. Like Rangers are so unbelievable. I cannot believe what is which presidential candidate is going to tackle the Rangers ticket price inflation. I don't know. All right, so let's leave that aside here. We want to talk about the Bengals. I think they're one of the most fascinating teams because we move on too quickly from teams, from players in the NFL, and even you know, Mahomes comes in 2018. Lamar Jackson wins the MVP in 2019, and we almost stopped talking about Mahomes. Like the way players can, and then obviously wins the Super Bowl. The way players can suck oxygen out of a league is funny. We learn no lessons from it, and we just move on very quickly. With Joe Burrow, he comes on, makes the Super Bowl, probably could have won the Super Bowl. Everybody's seen that screen grab a million times of what that fourth down and the third down play looked like. And he's had a rough go of it. And I kind of feel like he's the forgotten man a little bit. I will never write him off in any regard. And also, the biggest problem for me is that the stats were really bad last year in the small sample size because I believe the calf injury never healed, and that's just I don't know medically. Like I don't have anything other than cope because I believe in him so much. But like I just believe he was playing hurt all year and then got more hurt and then the wheels came off the wagon. So I don't have much to go on here. I'll start here. If the Bengals win this year, like win 13 games, 14 games, what does that look like? Why did it happen?
I think the things that you're going to have to look at this year is the defense is something that really went underrated. And I talked to Joe. I had a one-on-one with him back in March. So finally entered the exclusive club
There you
of
go.
I joined you in that category of people who've had one-on-ones with Joe
There you
Burrow.
go.
So we talked to him, and he said that even if I was healthy, I don't think that we had the team really good enough to compete the way they wanted to. And the defense last year was something that was overlooked a lot because everyone looked at Burrow and his health. But I think the thing that the safety combination just did not work, and you saw them immediately kind of cop to that because they released Nick Scott and they went back and got Von Bell when Carolina got rid of him. And then they also made a change in taking Dax Hill, moving him, their former first round pick, from free safety, now moving him to outside corner. And I think that a lot of the defense just it did not look the way it did in 2021 and 2022. So I think if they are going to be successful this year, for me, that's probably the biggest thing. How are they going to look on the back end? And you talk to everybody on that side of the ball, and immediately they're going to say the communication just was not good enough. And I think something that we forget about is how much what people sound like, especially in real time. And I was talking to Mike Hilton about this because he said, I played with Von Bell. He was here with the Bengals during their run. I was just in Carolina for that one season. He said, I know what Von sounds like. And so even mid-play, I was like, what do you mean by communication? Is it verbal stuff, nonverbal stuff? All of those things are going to be huge. But the other thing to look at when you look at the 13 wins and if they're going to be really successful at a high level, it boils down to Burrow being healthy because like you said, it's just so hard for this team to actualize their potential if Burrow is not at 100%. It's something that was talked about last year when he was coming off the calf, and Jamar Chase kept saying, we don't care about him coming back in training camp and being ready for week 1 or week 2. We want him ready for the end of the season and being healthy when the games matter. And I think the big thing that you're going to watch this year is Joe has now said that the biggest thing for him in his growth is learning how to understand his body, what nicks and bruises, what pulls are something that is something he can play through, and it's a situation where he needs to dial it back. And his biggest thing that he is one of the big themes of his offseason is learning when to take the foot off the gas to get ready for the upcoming season. And I think that played a key role in him not being healthy last year. It's something he has understood. And so these next few months really are going to determine whether the Bengals are going to be successful.
This offense. So let's actually start here. Tee Higgins is going to play this year, and then he's probably going to play for another team next year. If you're a betting man, you put money on that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, every indication that I've gotten so far is that, I think he even said it at a youth camp a couple weeks ago or about a month ago, is that he intends to play for the Bengals in 2024,
Yeah.
even though he hasn't signed that franchise tag yet. And talking to people, even after the franchise tag was given, one source told me it was a good win-win given the situation. T's going to get good salary for 1 year, but even if he got an extension now, I think because he's coming off the injuries last year, I think that he has a chance to have a good year and potentially make more money on another long-term deal. Are the Bengals going to be the team that gives that to him? I think right now, when you look at the numbers, it's awfully tough to justify paying for Joe Burrow, paying what Jamar Chase is going to come in, and then paying for Tee Higgins, and then trying to build a roster around that. One player yesterday did point out that Philly has found a way to somehow pay all these guys, been paying Jalen Hurts and paying AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. I think it's not a apples to apples comparison, but he said, somebody did
Right.
make it happen. So there is some precedent for that. But yes, I think that Tee Higgins will be here for at least one more year.
It's fairly similar to the Jesse Bates situation a couple years ago, where they said, let's just do one last ride. I think even did Burrow take Jesse Bates to a UFC fight, I think, at some point, to say, hey, let's all get on the same page here. And you kind of saw the conclusion coming there. But this offense, you know far more about it than I do. It feels like this is and just the Bengals will just so you guys know at home, the Bengals will never be quote unquote all in. That's just not what they do. They're not going to go out and swing for the fences with 3 trades. They're not going to go out and sign, a late veteran or whatever and say, hey, we're doing this. They're going to roll with the roster that they have. But when you consider what they've drafted, when you consider the younger receivers who are growing into roles, it doesn't feel like there's going to be Tee Higgins level production coming up behind him if Tee Higgins leaves. This feels like their window is this year, and then maybe next year the offense needs to find its identity a little bit. So I'll put it to you: do they have to win significantly this year? Do you feel like? Because I feel like Callahan leaving is one thing, but like I think last year you let Lou Anarumo come back with that defense. You assume that the defense will be intact and the contract holdouts will work itself out. But I just feel like there's a ton of talent on this team. I think they can win the Super Bowl, but I kind of feel like it has to happen this year because windows don't last forever in this league, especially when you have this much talent on this much cost controlled type of contracts.
Yeah, I think that you're probably not wrong in that, and you can make the argument that they're probably this team isn't the roster isn't as good as it was when you had a couple years ago in 2021 and 2022. You look at the talent across the board there; that was a really really good roster. Looking back, you had one of the best safeties in the NFL, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. You had a really good play, across the board on that defense, and then you had Jamar Chase as a rookie before teams really figured out what to do with Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins and Tyler Boyd, how to defend that situation. So that was the 21 and 22, a really good roster, and now you get to 2024, like you said, you just don't know what it's going to look like. I will say this: the receiver situation, I'm not all the way concerned about because personally, philosophically, like you said, I come from the great state of Texas where we produce a lot of receivers. Florida does as well. And, it's something that we're working on at ESPN too, is that looking at the receiver market as a whole, it's such an interesting space because some teams are investing a lot of money into the receiver position and saying, okay, we're seeing these contracts get reset. Justin Jefferson being the latest exception. You're seeing Miami go out, spend a lot of money with Jalen Waddle. They were willing to pay Tyreek Hill. Kansas City was not willing to pay Tyreek Hill. They said, we're going to let somebody else take that cost on. And we've seen teams go ahead and do that. And where the Bengals drafted Tee Higgins, it was at the top of the second round. And I think that as the offenses in football continues to evolve, are we going to continue to get more receivers who can come in and play at a decent level, if the quarterback is good, if the scheme is good, if the play calling is good, can all of those things offset maybe the elite receivers or the first round receivers? Can they elevate guys in that second and third round? And you should be able to, because of how 7-on-7 and really the SEC has embraced that style of ball.
Yes.
That is going to change the way that NFL teams are going to look moving forward, in my opinion. I think studying the game for as long as I have and seeing it from the grassroots level through college and now to the NFL, we see how those changes come along. So the receiver situation, I mean, are you going to get somebody as good as Tee Higgins? That's going to be the big question, because I believe Tee Higgins, if he goes somewhere else, is going to be a very good wide receiver one for somebody and is going to be a massive asset for a quarterback. It would not shock me if T puts up better numbers somewhere else than he has with the Bengals. But the bigger question, I think, is Trey Hendrickson and getting an elite
Yep.
edge rusher. That's harder to replace. Can you get a guy who's in that top tier? That's the big question for me.
Yeah. Follow up to that. Like, who's in the core? Who's in this core that the Bengals are like, we're gonna be rolling with these guys for 4 years, 5 years until they become really bad or injured or just decide to do other things. Like when you have a ton of talent, I mean, they really do have 14 or 15 pretty good players, and not all of them are elite. But like, who do the Bengals value as their core outside of obviously Burrow and Chase?
Yeah, I think those are the two big guys off rip. And
Yeah.
then you look at Orlando Brown's a guy they really like. They think that
Yep.
he can go in and play well. And the way they gave him the money that says that. Anytime you want to look at who a team really values, all you have to do is follow
Yeah.
the money. That's all that needs to be done. And so, I think Cam Taylor-Britt's a guy who's going to continue to ascend. I think they really like him a lot. When he's healthy, has been able to do really good stuff. And I think he plays at a really strong level. They really like Logan Wilson. I think he does a really good job.
Yep.
And then now figuring out what's next behind them. Can Miles Murphy, who was their first round pick last year, can he give them more production? Can that defensive line be a little bit better? Chris Jenkins, who they got as a rookie this year, can he maybe ascend in that role? And for me, I think that's the interesting thing is a couple of years ago, it was much easier to identify and say, these are the guys who we have. And going back to your question earlier, I think this year you're going to start to find out who is going to be really part of that core with Burrow and Chase. Who can they build around? Because they've went defensively with a lot of younger options to offset the cost that you're going to have on the offensive side of the ball. And they haven't really given, when you look at some of these players, the long-term deals that you're looking for. Right now, I believe off the top of Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, who's worth the money?
Yep.
That's what the Bengals are going to try to figure out. So I think this is just a massive year to figure out who's going to be part of that core, because you're going to have to build around these two massive contracts long-term.
Any of the rookies or second-year guys I don't know about who are going to fill the gaps, and if some of these guys end up moving on. I mean, like, are there any? Like, obviously, Amarius Mims has so much potential. Jermaine Burton, I didn't love that pick. I did like the Chris Jenkins pick. Liked a couple of these guys, but are there guys I just don't know about? Where like, okay, this is a guy here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I do like when you look at the back end production of Miles Murphy last year and what they wanted him
Yeah.
to do. I think that was a guy that he has the potential. If he plays at that level, he continues to grow, who could be really good. Mims is a project. We'll see if he can be somebody who can be that right tackle. And just where they're at, there's not a lot of sexy rookies that they've had the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And, I think Andre Yoshivas, Charlie Jones, those are two guys. They're going to really, and, talking to Yoshivas throughout these OTAs, he understands there's going to be a window potentially to have a wide receiver 2 opening in 2025. He's fully aware of the Tee Higgins situation. And he's a guy who I will say he's done a really good job in his 2 touchdowns last year came on broken plays, and his ability to connect with Burrow in good and high leverage situations. He just has an understanding of where to go. And that is a very big skill to have, because you talk to receivers who do well with Joe, guys like Trent Irwin. He said the biggest thing is having that trust with Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those 2 guys are guys I'm going to watch. And yeah, the Mims, the Burtons, the Chris Jenkins, we'll see how they continue to develop. But those are some of the guys I'm going to keep my eye on throughout OTAs and as we get into the preseason.
When a quarterback is a true magician, Burrow is like this when he can throw into double coverage if he wants to, because he knows he can underthrow it and the receiver will adjust. Trust is the number one most important thing. That was always the Rodgers thing, where that's why he would always throw practice interceptions, training camp interceptions, is because he wanted to see, hey, if I throw this right here in this corner of the end zone, right by the pylon, is this guy going to get it? And if he doesn't, it might get picked off, but he'd rather test the receiver in order to see that. And I don't think people realize that's part of the process. Same with Mahomes too. That's why I was so impressed, by the way, not to go on an aside, with Mahomes manufacturing these wide receivers last year and getting something out of Kadarius Toney, getting something out of MVS, because it's like, it's his threshold for trust is so high. And he basically said, screw it. I'm sure he didn't trust these guys, but he threw to them anyway. My joke is that Mahomes should have won Walter Payton Man of the Year for continuing to go at MVS after all of those drops, and he still did it anyway. And so sometimes you're forced to, but Burrow has the luxury of Chase. He has the luxury of, I mean, like, even I think Mike Gesicki will be a reliable target this year. He has, you mentioned Trent Irwin. This year he'll have Tee Higgins. We'll see Andre Yoshevich. We'll see how those guys go. Charlie Jones. There's depth there. I just don't know after this year. I think having Higgins and Chase on the field at the same time, and even Tyler Boyd doing the dirty work last year, I just think that was such an important part of the Burrow offense that it just does give me pause for 2025. But it's a nice problem to have that they're rolling into it this season with clarity.
With these receiver situation, you can look at maybe drafting a guy in 2025 to replace Tee Higgins. I think that what the Bengals have done historically, they've been able to do a good job of finding receivers, which is why they were able to go get Higgins. I mean, they made the right decision in 2021 in getting Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. I think both could have worked. I think you could make a good argument for both, but they said this guy is worth it. And, that was a big risk to take at the time, and they were correct in that. So I think you can answer that question down the line. And then right now you do need to figure out where this team is at, because the AFC is too good and there are too many good teams. And now there's too many good quarterbacks that you have to figure out where you're at each season. And I think this is going to be such a big year for what this franchise is going to look like over the next few years.
Thank you, buddy. Enjoy Ohio high school football in 2 months and enjoy the rest of your offseason.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Always a blast, man.